The ice broke beneath Penelope Owens with a sound like gunfire, and the Montana Creek swallowed her whole before she could draw breath to scream. Nathan Turner had been tracking elk through the aspens when he heard the crack echo across the winter landscape. His bay mare lifted her head, ears pricked forward, and he felt his gut clench with instinct honed by 27 years of frontier living. Someone was in trouble. He urged his horse toward the sound, breaking through a stand of lodgepole pines until he spotted the frozen creek below. A dark hole gaped in the white surface, and even from 50 yards away, he could see pale fingers clawing at the ice edge. He did not think. There was no time for thinking. Nathan kicked free of his stirrups and hit the ground running, his boots pounding through knee-deep snow. The cold bit through his wool coat, but he barely felt it. All he saw were those fingers slipping, disappearing, reappearing in desperate rhythm. He shed his coat as he ran, knowing the weight of waterlogged wool could drag them both under. His gun belt followed, dropped in the snow without ceremony. The woman's face surfaced as he reached the creek bank, her mouth open in a soundless gasp, her eyes wide with terror and already glazing with the first stages of hypothermia. Her dark hair spread around her head like ink in water. Nathan did not hesitate at the edge. He sat down hard and slid himself across the ice on his belly, distributing his weight, praying the surface would hold just a little longer. The cold bit through his shirt immediately, but he kept moving, pushing himself forward with his elbows and knees. "Hold on," he called, though he doubted she could hear him over the roar of her own panic and the water rushing beneath the ice. "Just hold on to the edge." Her fingers were white, bloodless, barely able to grip. She was losing the battle. Nathan pushed himself closer, the ice groaning beneath him, and reached out. His hand closed around her wrist just as her grip failed. The contact sent a jolt through him, something he would later struggle to explain, as if touching her completed a circuit he had not known was broken. He pulled, muscles straining, and her other arm came up. She grabbed his forearm with surprising strength, the strength of pure survival instinct, and he began working himself backward, dragging her with him. The ice complained loudly, cracking in warning, and Nathan moved faster, his heart hammering against the frozen surface beneath him. Water soaked his shirt, his trousers, but he kept moving, kept pulling, until finally her shoulders cleared the hole, then her torso. She was wearing a traveling dress, now heavy with water and freezing fast. He could see her shaking violently, her lips blue, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. When they were far enough from the hole, Nathan rolled onto his side and then to his feet, pulling her up with him. She could not stand. Her legs folded and he caught her against his chest. She collapsed into him, her frozen hands clutching at his shirt, her whole body convulsing with shivers. That was when she looked up at him, her eyes the color of summer sage despite the winter dying around them, and she said the words that would change everything. "I dreamed of you." Her voice was barely a whisper, her breath crystallizing in the air between them. Nathan stared down at her, stunned, but there was no time to process the strange declaration. She was freezing to death in his arms. He scooped her up, surprised by how light she was, and ran for his horse. The mare stood ground-tied where he had left her, well-trained and steady. He managed to get the woman draped across the saddle, then mounted behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping his arms around her. "Stay awake," he said against her ear as he turned the mare toward his cabin. "You hear me? Stay awake and keep breathing." She made a sound, something between acknowledgement and a sob, and pressed closer to him, seeking heat he was not sure he had to give. His own clothes were freezing now, ice forming in his hair, but the cabin was only 2 miles away. He could make it. They could make it. He pushed the mare into a gallop despite the snow, despite the danger of the terrain. Every second mattered now. The woman shook against him, violent tremors that he could feel through his chest. He held her tighter, willing his warmth into her, and kept riding. The cabin appeared through the trees like salvation, small and rough-hewn but solid, smoke still rising from the chimney where he had banked the fire before leaving that morning. Nathan pulled the mare right up to the door, dismounted with the woman in his arms, and kicked the door open. Heat rolled out to meet them, blessed and crucial. He carried her straight to the fireplace and set her down on the bearskin rug. Her eyes were closed now, her shaking less violent, which worried him more than the tremors had. He had seen hypothermia before. He knew the danger of the body giving up, shutting down, accepting the cold. "No, you do not," he said firmly, patting her cheek. "Open your eyes. Look at me." She did slowly, those sage-green eyes unfocused but open. He nodded. "Good. Now we need to get you out of these wet clothes, all of them." "You understand?" She nodded, a tiny movement, but her hands were useless, still frozen. Nathan grabbed a blanket from his bed and set it beside her, then began working at the buttons of her dress. His fingers were clumsy with cold and the wet fabric fought him, but he persisted. The dress was well made, expensive, with tiny pearl buttons that seemed designed to frustrate. He finally gave up and pulled his knife, cutting the fabric away. Underneath, she wore a corset and chemise, both soaked through. Those he cut away too, trying not to look, trying to preserve what modesty he could, even as he knew her life depended on speed. When she was finally free of the wet clothes, he wrapped her in the blanket and pulled her close to the fire, then stood and stripped off his own frozen garments. He pulled on dry trousers and a flannel shirt, then added more wood to the fire, building it up until heat radiated through the small cabin. He filled his kettle and hung it over the flames, then turned back to the woman. She was watching him now, more alert, her shaking starting again, which was a good sign. Her body was warming enough to fight. He grabbed every other blanket he owned and piled them around her, then sat down beside her and pulled her against his side, adding his warmth to the fires. "What is your name?" he asked, rubbing her arms through the blankets, trying to stimulate circulation. "Penelope," she managed through chattering teeth. "Penelope Owens." "I am Nathan Turner. You are safe now, Penelope. You are going to be fine." "I dreamed of you," she said again, clearer this time, and looked up at him with those remarkable eyes. "I have dreamed of you for months. Your face. I did not understand until now." Nathan did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just held her and let the fire work. The kettle began to steam, and he carefully extracted himself to make tea, strong and hot. He held the cup to her lips and she drank, wincing at the heat but drinking nonetheless. Color was slowly returning to her face, pink touching her cheeks and lips. "What were you doing out here?" he asked when she had finished the tea. "This is wilderness, no town for 15 miles in any direction." "Running," she said simply, and he heard a world of pain in that single word. "I was running away." "From what?" She closed her eyes. "A man who believed he owned me. A man my father promised me to without asking if I wanted to be promised." Nathan felt anger kindle in his chest. He had seen too much of that in his years, women treated like property, like cattle to be traded. "You are from Oro Blanco." "No, from Helena. But I have family in Oro Blanco, an aunt." I was trying to reach her. She opened her eyes again and he saw tears there. "I hired a man with a wagon to take me, but he tried, so I ran. I took one of the horses and rode until I could not ride anymore. I thought I could cross the creek. The ice looked solid." "How long have you been out there?" "Since yesterday morning. I slept in a hollow tree last night. I was so cold." Her voice broke. "I thought I was going to die, and then I saw you. Your face. The same face from my dreams. Nathan studied her, looking for signs of delirium or confusion, but her eyes were clear now, focused. She meant what she said, however impossible it seemed. "Tell me about these dreams," he said quietly. Penelope was silent for a long moment, her gaze on the fire. "They started 6 months ago. Always the same. I would be lost or in danger and you would come. I never saw exactly what you looked like, but I knew you. I felt safe when I saw you in the dreams. And when I fell through the ice when I was under the water, I thought of the dreams. I thought if I could just hold on, you would come." She looked at him again. "And you did." The conviction in her voice shook something loose in Nathan, some wall he had built up over years of solitude. He had come to Montana Territory 3 years ago, after his family died of fever in Kansas, seeking emptiness and silence. He had found both, and he had told himself it was enough. But looking at this woman, this stranger who somehow was not a stranger, he felt the wall cracking. "Rest now," he said, deflecting because he did not know what else to do. "You are safe here. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." But Penelope reached out and caught his hand, her fingers still cold but growing warmer. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me. For believing me, even a little." "I pulled you from a frozen creek," Nathan said, attempting lightness. "That part I know is real. The rest we will work out." She smiled, a small, tentative thing that transformed her face, and Nathan felt his heart do something it had not done in years. It opened. Just a crack, but enough. He settled beside her as the afternoon faded into evening, keeping the fire high, bringing her more tea and then soup made from dried venison and winter vegetables from his root cellar. She ate slowly, her appetite returning with her warmth, and told him more of her story. Her father was a banker in Helena, prosperous and controlling. He had arranged her marriage to a business associate, a man of 45 to Penelope's 22, a man she described as cruel and cold. She had tried to refuse, but her father would not hear it, so she had taken her mother's jewelry, the only thing of value she owned, and run. "I will not go back," she said with quiet fierceness. "I would rather die." "You will not die," Nathan said, and meant it. "And you will not go back unless you choose to. But your family in Oro Blanco, they will help you. My aunt will. She never approved of my father. She married for love, moved to Montana, and my father considered her dead for it. But she wrote to me secretly. She told me if I ever needed sanctuary, I could come to her." "Then we will get you to Oro Blanco," Nathan said. "It is about 60 miles south. 3 days riding in good weather, longer in this snow. But you need to recover first. You need rest." Penelope nodded, her eyes already heavy. The warmth and food and safety were pulling her down into sleep. Nathan took the empty bowl from her hands and added another blanket, then retreated to his rocking chair by the window. He would keep watch tonight, tend the fire, make sure she continued to warm. He owed her that much. But as he sat in the darkness, listening to her breathe, he could not stop thinking about her words. "I dreamed of you." It should have sounded like madness, but somehow it did not. Somehow, holding her in his arms, it had felt like recognition, like coming home to a place he had never been. The wind picked up outside, howling around the cabin, and Nathan was grateful he had found her when he did. Another hour in that creek, or even just out in the cold, and she would have been beyond saving. The thought made him cold inside, a different kind of cold than the Montana winter. He looked at her sleeping form, bundled in blankets, her dark hair drying in waves around her face, and felt something shift fundamentally in his chest. He had been alone for so long. By choice, by necessity, by the simple fact that he did not know how to be any other way after losing everyone he loved. But Penelope Owens, with her sage green eyes and her impossible dreams, made him wonder if maybe alone was not the only option. The night deepened, and Nathan kept his vigil, adding wood to the fire, watching Penelope sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, decisions to be made and plans to be set. But tonight, in the warmth of his cabin with snow falling soft outside, he let himself feel something he had not felt in 3 years. Hope. Morning came cold and clear, the sun striking diamonds off the snow. Nathan woke stiff in his chair, his neck protesting, to find Penelope sitting up by the fire, still wrapped in blankets but looking infinitely better than she had the day before. Her color was good, her eyes bright, and when she saw him watching, she smiled. "Good morning," she said, her voice stronger. "I was not sure if yesterday was real or another dream." "It was real," Nathan said, standing and stretching. "How do you feel?" "Sore. Cold still, deep inside, but alive." She looked at him seriously. "Because of you." He felt heat rise in his face and turned away, busying himself with the fire. "Are you hungry? I can make breakfast. Please. I feel like I have not eaten in days." She had not, Nathan thought, or not enough anyway. He put coffee on to boil and mixed up batter for flapjacks, working efficiently in his small kitchen space. Penelope watched him from her nest of blankets, and he was intensely aware of her gaze, of her presence in his cabin, of the way the morning light caught in her hair. "I should check on the mare," he said when the flapjacks were cooking. "The horse you came on, did you leave it somewhere?" Penelope's face fell. "I do not know. When I ran from the man with the wagon I just rode, the horse was exhausted when I fell through the ice. It might have wandered off or—" She did not finish the thought, but Nathan understood. The horse could have died from exposure or been taken by wolves, another casualty of her flight. "I will look for it," he promised. "After breakfast, when there is more light." They ate together, Nathan sitting on the floor near her, and it felt strangely domestic, comfortable in a way that should have been impossible with a woman he had known less than a day. But Penelope made it easy. She asked about his life, about how he came to be in Montana, and he found himself telling her things he had not spoken aloud in years. About his family, his parents and younger sister, all taken by the fever. About the emptiness that followed, the way Kansas felt haunted after they were gone. About coming to Montana to work as a trapper and guide, seeking isolation and finding it. "But you were lonely," Penelope said softly. It was not a question. Nathan considered denying it, then did not. "Yes, I was lonely. I am lonely." "Me too," she said. "Even surrounded by people in Helena, I was lonely. My father only saw me as a tool. My friends were all married off or too afraid to cross their families. I felt like I was suffocating." She looked down at her hands. "That is why I ran. Not just because I did not want to marry that man, but because I needed to breathe. I needed to be free, even if just for a moment." Nathan understood that more than she knew. Freedom was why he had come to Montana, why he lived alone in the wilderness. But he was learning in her presence that freedom could be lonely, that maybe what he had been seeking all along was not isolation but choice. "Your aunt in Oro Blanco," he said. "Tell me about her." Penelope brightened. "Her name is Margaret Olson. She married a rancher, a good man by all accounts. They have a small spread outside town. She wrote that they never had children of their own, that they would welcome me if I ever wanted to visit. I think she knew, even then, that I would need to escape eventually." "And you think she will take you in, help you start over?" "I hope so. I have to believe so, because if she will not—" Penelope trailed off, her fear showing through. "Then you will figure something else out," Nathan said firmly. "You did not survive that creek to give up now." She met his eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went deeper than words. Nathan felt it in his bones, the same certainty he had felt when he grabbed her hand in the water. This woman mattered. She had come into his life through chance or fate or dream logic, and she mattered. He stood, needing to move, needing to do something with the energy suddenly coursing through him. "I am going to look for your horse. You should rest more. There are books on the shelf if you want something to occupy yourself, and the fire will keep you warm." "Nathan," she said as he pulled on his coat. He turned back, and she was looking at him with such openness, such trust, that it stole his breath. "Be careful." "Always am," he said, and meant it more now than he ever had before. He had a reason to be careful now, a reason to come back. Outside, the world was a study in white and blue, the snow deep and pristine, the sky endless. Nathan whistled for his mare, and she came trotting from the lean to shelter where she had spent the night, warm and content. He saddled her quickly and set out, backtracking to the creek where he had pulled Penelope from the ice. The hole in the creek was frozen over again, a thin skim of new ice marking where death had nearly claimed a life. Nathan studied the area, looking for tracks, for any sign of the horse Penelope had ridden. He found them after a few minutes of searching, hoofprints leading away from the creek, deeper into the forest. He followed, hoping the animal had survived. He found the horse a mile downstream, standing in a thick copse of spruce, shivering but alive. It was a decent animal, a sorrel mare with a white blaze, exhausted and scared but sound. Nathan approached slowly, speaking soft words, and the mare let him come close. He checked her over, finding no major injuries, just fatigue and cold. He tied a lead rope to her halter and started back toward the cabin, leading her behind his own mount. As he rode, he thought about Penelope, about her dreams, about the impossibility and rightness of finding her. He was a practical man, not given to mysticism or romance, but he could not deny what he felt. From the moment he touched her hand in the water, something had shifted in the universe. He did not understand it, but he trusted it. Back at the cabin, he tended to both horses, rubbing them down and giving them grain and fresh water. The sorrel would need a few days to recover before she could be ridden hard, which meant Penelope would need a few days too. Nathan found he did not mind the delay. Every day she stayed was a day he got to know her better, a day to explore this strange, sudden connection between them. He returned to the cabin to find Penelope dressed in some of his clothes, trousers and a shirt that were far too large for her but better than the blankets. She had rolled up the sleeves and cuffs and belted the trousers with a piece of rope, and she looked charming and ridiculous and beautiful all at once. "I hope you do not mind," she said, gesturing to the clothes. "I found them in your chest, and I could not stay wrapped in blankets forever." "I do not mind," Nathan said, and realized he was grinning. "They suit you." She laughed, a sound like water over stones, clear and bright. "I look like a child playing dress-up." "You look warm and practical," Nathan countered. "And I found your horse. She is in the shelter, recovering." "She will be fine, but she needs rest." Relief washed over Penelope's face. "Thank you. I was worried I had killed her with my foolishness." "You were not foolish. You were desperate. There is a difference." Nathan hung up his coat and moved to the fire. "But it means we cannot leave for Oro Blanco for a few days yet. Both you and the mare need to regain your strength." Penelope nodded, and if she was disappointed by the delay, she did not show it. "Then I will earn my keep. Put me to work. I can cook, clean, mend. I will not be a burden." "You are not a burden," Nathan said, more sharply than he intended. "You are a guest. You almost died yesterday. And you saved me, I know, but I do not like feeling useless." She lifted her chin, a stubborn set to her jaw that Nathan was beginning to recognize. "Please, let me help." So he did. Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm, a partnership that felt natural despite its newness. Penelope proved adept at the domestic tasks she mentioned, but she also showed interest in the wilderness around them. She asked about the tracks in the snow, the habits of the elk and deer, the way to predict the weather by the sky. Nathan found himself teaching her, showing her how to read the forest, and discovered he enjoyed it immensely. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, sharing stories and dreams. Penelope told him about growing up in Helena, the constraints of society life, the expectations that had always felt like chains. Nathan told her about his childhood in Kansas, about working cattle with his father, about the sister who had loved to sing and the mother who had taught him to read. "They would have liked you," he said one night, surprised by the words even as he spoke them. Penelope looked at him, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "You think so? I know so. My mother always said I needed someone who would challenge me, keep me honest. My sister would have loved how stubborn you are." "I am not stubborn," Penelope protested, then laughed at Nathan's expression. "All right, I am stubborn, but it has kept me alive." "It has," Nathan agreed. "Stubbornness and dreams." She sobered at that, her gaze distant. "Do you believe me? About the dreams?" Nathan had been thinking about that question for days. He still did not understand it, still could not explain it, but he had stopped trying to rationalize it away. "I believe you dreamed something, and I believe I was meant to find you. Whether that is fate or God or just blind luck, I do not know, but I am grateful for it." "So am I," Penelope whispered. "I did not know what I was running toward, only what I was running from, but now I think maybe I was running to you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Nathan felt his heart pound, felt the weight of the moment. He could dismiss it, make a joke, retreat back into the safety of solitude. Or he could be brave. He could reach for what was being offered. He reached. Taking her hand, he laced their fingers together and felt the rightness of it, the completion. "I am glad you ran to me," he said quietly. "I am glad I found you." Penelope's eyes shone with unshed tears, but she was smiling. "I dreamed of you and you were real. You are real." "I am real," Nathan confirmed, "and you are safe." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers. No more words were needed. The understanding between them had gone beyond language, into something deeper and truer. On the fourth day after pulling her from the creek, Nathan declared both Penelope and her mare fit for travel. The weather had cleared, and while it was still bitterly cold, the sky was blue and the way south to Oro Blanco was open. They prepared to leave at first light the next morning. That night, lying in his bed while Penelope slept near the fire, Nathan stared at the ceiling and acknowledged the truth he had been avoiding. He did not want to take her to Oro Blanco and leave her there. He wanted her to stay. He wanted to wake up every morning to find her in his cabin, to talk with her by the fire, to teach her the ways of the wilderness and learn from her in turn. He wanted, with a fierceness that startled him, to build a life with this woman he had known for less than a week. It was madness. It was impossible. It was the truest thing he had ever felt. The next morning dawned clear and cold, and they set out south, riding side by side through the snow-laden forest. Penelope sat her mare well, despite her ordeal, and Nathan felt pride watching her. She was strong, this woman. Stronger than she perhaps knew. They made good time, stopping at midday to rest the horses and eat the provisions Nathan had packed. The wilderness stretched around them, endless and beautiful, and Nathan saw Penelope looking at it with wonder. "I never knew it could be like this," she said. "In Helena there are mountains, but we never went into them. It was not proper for ladies, but this." She gestured at the expanse of forest and sky. "This is freedom." "This is home," Nathan said, and realized he meant it differently than he had a week ago. Home was not just a place anymore. It was a person. They camped that night in a sheltered valley, and Nathan built a fire while Penelope tended the horses. They had divided the tasks without discussion, each taking on what they were suited for, working together like a team long practiced. After they ate, they sat close to the fire, wrapped in blankets against the cold. "Tomorrow we will reach Oro Blanco," Penelope said, and Nathan heard something in her voice, a hesitation, a question. "We will," he confirmed, though his chest felt tight. "And then what?" She turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You will leave me with my aunt and go back to your cabin alone." Nathan swallowed hard. This was the moment. He could nod, could agree to that plan, could protect himself from the risk of vulnerability, or he could tell her the truth. "I do not want to," he said, his voice rough. "I do not want to leave you, Penelope. I know it has only been a few days, I know it seems insane, but I feel like I have known you forever. Like I was waiting for you without knowing I was waiting." Her breath caught. "You feel it too, this connection." "I feel it. God help me, I feel it with everything I am." He took her hands in his, holding tight. "I do not know how this works. I do not know what the rules are for falling in love with someone you pulled from a frozen creek. But I do know I do not want to say goodbye to you." "Then do not," Penelope said fiercely. "Nathan, I dreamed of you for months. I felt you before I met you. And now that I have found you, now that I know you are real and good and kind, how can I let you go?" "Your aunt," Nathan started, but she shook her head. "My aunt will understand. Or she will not, and I will figure something else out. But I am not running anymore. I am choosing. I am choosing you if you will have me." Nathan felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked away for too long. "I will have you," he said, and pulled her close, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. She kissed him back with a passion that matched his own, her hands fisting in his shirt, and it felt like coming home, like all the pieces of himself he had lost were suddenly found again. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Penelope was smiling through tears. "I dreamed of you," she said again, "and you are better than any dream." "We still have to get you to your aunt," Nathan said practically, even as he held her close. "You need safety, security. You need to be free of your father's control legally. We have to do this right." "I know," Penelope agreed, "but we do it together. Promise me, Nathan, we do it together." "Together," he promised, "from now on." They held each other through the night, wrapped in blankets and possibility. And when dawn came, they rode the final miles to Oro Blanco as partners, as a team, as two people who had found each other against impossible odds and refused to let go. Oro Blanco was a small town, maybe 300 people, nestled in a valley with mountains rising on all sides. It had the rough look of a mining settlement, though the mines had played out years ago and now the town survived on ranching and timber. Nathan led them down the main street, drawing looks from the locals, and stopped at the general store to ask after Margaret Olson. The storekeeper, a weathered man named Pete, gave them directions to the Olson Ranch, 5 miles west of town. "Good people, the Olsons," he said. "Margaret is a fine woman. You friends of theirs?" "Family," Penelope said, and Nathan heard the hope in her voice. They found the ranch as the sun was reaching its apex, a modest spread with a well-built house and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in a far pasture, and smoke rose from the chimney. As they approached, the door opened and a woman stepped out, shading her eyes against the sun. She was in her 50s, Nathan guessed, with dark hair streaked with gray and a face that might have been stern but was softened by smile lines around her eyes and mouth. She watched them ride up, her expression curious, and then her eyes fixed on Penelope and went wide. "Lord above," she breathed. "Penelope, Aunt Margaret," Penelope said, and her voice broke. She slid from her saddle and ran the last few steps, and Margaret caught her in a fierce embrace. "Child, what are you doing here? What happened?" Margaret held her niece at arm's length, taking in the borrowed clothes, the shadows under her eyes. Then she looked past Penelope to Nathan, still mounted, and her expression sharpened. "Who is this?" "This is Nathan Turner," Penelope said, turning back to him with a smile that made Nathan's heart clench. "He saved my life. He pulled me from a frozen creek when I would have died. He is the reason I am here." Margaret's face transformed, her sternness melting into gratitude. "Then you are welcome here, Nathan Turner. Both of you, come inside. You look half frozen and wholly exhausted." Inside, the house was warm and smelled of bread and coffee. Margaret sat them at her kitchen table and bustled around, producing food and hot drinks with the efficiency of a woman used to hospitality. Her husband, Lars Olsen, was out checking the cattle but would be back by evening. As they ate, Penelope told her aunt everything. The arranged marriage, her father's refusal to listen, her flight from Helena, the man with the wagon who had tried to force himself on her, the terrifying plunge through the ice. Margaret's face went through a range of emotions as she listened, anger and fear and relief chasing each other across her features. When Penelope finished, Margaret reached across the table and took her hand. "You are safe now," she said firmly. "Your father has no power here, and that man he wanted you to marry has even less. You can stay with us as long as you need. Forever if you want." "Thank you," Penelope whispered. "I did not know where else to go. You came to the right place." Margaret looked at Nathan, her gaze assessing. "And you, Nathan Turner, you have my eternal gratitude for saving my niece. What are your intentions now?" The question was direct, almost challenging, and Nathan respected her for it. She was protecting Penelope as she should. He met her eyes steadily. "My intention is to marry her if she will have me," he said, and felt Penelope's hand find his under the table. "I know it is fast. I know it seems mad, but I love her. I will spend my life making sure she is safe and happy and free." Margaret studied him for a long moment, then looked at Penelope. "And you, child, this is what you want." "It is," Penelope said without hesitation. "I know it is quick, Aunt Margaret, but it is right. I feel it. I dreamed of him before I ever met him. And now that I have found him, I do not want to lose him." Margaret sighed, but she was smiling. "Then who am I to stand in the way of fate? But you will do this properly. You will stay here, get to know each other without the pressure of survival. You will let the town get to know you both. And you will give yourselves time to be sure." It was sensible advice, and Nathan nodded. "We will. Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Olsen. Call me Margaret, and you are welcome." She stood, practical again. "Now let me show you where you will sleep, and we will figure out the rest as we go." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Nathan's life. He took work with Lars Olsen, helping with the ranch, and proved himself capable and trustworthy. Penelope stayed with her aunt, learning the workings of the household and the ranch, but she and Nathan spent every possible moment together. They walked the land in the winter cold, talking and laughing and learning each other's rhythms. They attended church in Oro Blanco, where Penelope's story quickly became known, and the townspeople rallied around her, protective of their own against the distant threat of her father. Nathan courted her properly, with flowers stolen from Margaret's winter greenhouse and small gifts carved from wood during the evenings. He told her his hopes and fears, his dreams for a life beyond solitude. She told him hers, painting pictures of a future where she could be free and valued, where she could build something meaningful. 2 months after pulling her from the creek, on a bright March morning when the snow was just beginning to melt, Nathan asked Penelope to marry him. He did it without a ring, without grand gestures, just the two of them standing on the edge of the Olsen property, looking out at the mountains. "I do not have much to offer," he said, holding both her hands. "Just a cabin in the wilderness and a life that will be hard sometimes." But I promise I will love you every day. I promise I will never try to control you or cage you. I promise we will build a life together as equals." Penelope was crying, but she was smiling too, that brilliant smile that lit up her whole face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. I have been waiting for you my whole life. I am not going to let you go now." He kissed her there, with the mountains watching and the first birds of spring singing in the trees, and it felt like a vow, like a seal on a promise made the moment he pulled her from the water. They were married a month later, in the small church in Oro Blanco, with the whole town in attendance. Margaret cried and Lars beamed with pride as if Penelope were his own daughter. The preacher, an old circuit rider named Josiah, spoke of providence and the mysterious ways of God, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation cheered. At the reception in the town hall, Lars pulled Nathan aside. "You take care of her," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "She has had enough pain in her life. You make her happy." "I will," Nathan promised, "every day for the rest of my life." That night they rode back to Nathan's cabin, which was to be their home. He had spent weeks preparing it, adding a room, building better furniture, making it a place worthy of a wife. Penelope walked through it with tears in her eyes, touching everything, taking it all in. "It is perfect," she said. "Nathan, it is perfect." "It is ours," he corrected, pulling her close. "Everything I have is ours now." They made love that night with the tenderness of new beginnings and the passion of long-awaited union, and Nathan felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. Penelope was his wife, his partner, his home. Everything that had led him to that moment, all the pain and loss and loneliness, suddenly made sense. It had all been leading him to her. In the morning, wrapped in quilts with snow falling soft outside, Penelope traced the line of his jaw and said, "I dreamed of this too, you know. Not just finding you, but this. A life with you. A home." "Then we will make the dream real," Nathan said. "Together." And they did. Over the months and years that followed, they built a life in the Montana wilderness that was everything a life should be. They worked together, trapping and hunting, tending a garden in the summer, weathering the harsh winters side by side. They made friends with the Blackfeet who ranged through the territory, trading goods and sharing knowledge. They became known throughout the region as good people, fair and honest. Penelope never heard from her father again, though they learned through letters from Helena that he had died 2 years after her escape, still bitter and unreconciled to her choice. She mourned what might have been, but she did not mourn the man he was. Her life was too full of joy to dwell on the past. 3 years after their marriage, their first child was born, a son they named Henry after Nathan's father. He was strong and loud and demanding, and Nathan fell in love the moment he held him. Watching Penelope with their son, seeing her fierce protectiveness and tender care, Nathan thought his heart might burst with love. "We made this," Penelope said one night, nursing Henry by the fire. "This beautiful life. I never thought I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Nathan admitted. "I thought I would spend my life alone, and I had made peace with it, but you showed me there was another way." "We showed each other," Penelope corrected. "You gave me freedom. I gave you connection. We gave each other love." Henry was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Grace, who had Penelope's green eyes and Nathan's stubborn chin. And then 2 years after that, another son, Thomas. The cabin grew, adding rooms and lofts until it was a proper house, filled with noise and life and love. Margaret and Lars were frequent visitors, doting grandparents in all but blood. The town of Oro Blanco remained their anchor, a place to trade and socialize and remind themselves they were part of a community. But the wilderness was their home, the place where they were truest to themselves. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan and Penelope rowed back to the creek where he had pulled her from the ice. It was summer now, the water running clear and swift, the ice a distant memory. They sat on the bank, holding hands, watching the water flow. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Running, I mean. Everything you left behind." Penelope looked at him, her face older now but still beautiful, still full of the stubborn fire that had kept her alive. "Never," she said. "Not for a single moment. I regret that it had to happen that way, that I had to be desperate enough to risk death. But I do not regret the outcome. I found you. I found myself. I found a life worth living." "I found the same," Nathan said. "That day, when I heard the ice crack, I thought I was just going to help someone in trouble. I did not know I was saving my whole future." "I dreamed of you," Penelope said, smiling at the memory. "And you were real. You were everything I needed, even when I did not know what I needed." "We were meant for each other," Nathan said. "I believe that now. I do not know how or why, but I believe it." They sat there as the sun moved across the sky, talking and remembering, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together. When they finally rowed back to their home, their children were waiting, along with Margaret and Lars, who had come for the anniversary celebration. That night, with the house full of laughter and love, Nathan looked around and felt a peace so profound, it was almost painful. This was what life was meant to be. Not just survival, not just endurance, but this. Family and love and joy built on a foundation of shared courage and impossible dreams. Years continued to pass, bringing their own challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters where game was scarce and the cold bit deep. There were illnesses and injuries, the constant low-level danger of frontier life. But through it all, Nathan and Penelope remained constant to each other, a team forged in crisis and tempered by love. Their children grew strong and capable, learning the ways of the wilderness from their father and the fierce independence from their mother. Henry became a skilled tracker and hunter. Grace showed a talent for healing, studying with the town doctor and becoming known throughout the region for her skill. Thomas, the youngest, loved the horses and dreamed of raising them, breeding them into something better and stronger. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep when their children were teenagers, and Lars followed her 6 months later, unable to exist without his beloved wife. Nathan and Penelope inherited the ranch in Oro Blanco and debated moving there, but in the end, they could not leave the cabin. It was too much a part of them, too full of memories and meaning. Instead, they hired a foreman to run the ranch and visited regularly, keeping Margaret and Lars's legacy alive. When Nathan was 53 and Penelope 48, they became grandparents for the first time. Henry married a sweet woman from Oro Blanco, and their daughter, Margaret, named for Penelope's aunt, was born on a snowy December morning. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Nathan felt the circle complete, the pattern of life continuing. "She looks like you," he told Penelope, seeing the baby's green eyes. "She looks like possibility," Penelope said, taking the baby from him. "Like the future." More grandchildren followed over the years as Grace and Thomas also married and started families. The cabin became a gathering place, a home base for the growing family. Nathan and Penelope took to their roles as grandparents with enthusiasm, teaching the little ones the same lessons they had taught their own children. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration in Oro Blanco. The whole town turned out, 3 generations of people who had been touched by their story. The preacher, old Josiah's replacement, gave a toast about love and providence, about the mysterious ways that 2 souls find each other. Nathan stood with Penelope beside him, her hand in his, and looked out at the assembled crowd. Their children, grown and strong. Their grandchildren, bright with potential, friends and neighbors who had become family over the decades. This was the life he had built, the life that had started on a frozen creek in the depths of winter. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice carrying across the room. "All of you, thank you. For welcoming us, for supporting us, for being part of our story." He turned to Penelope and his voice softened. "And you, my love, thank you for dreaming of me. Thank you for holding on when the ice broke. Thank you for choosing me every day for 30 years. Penelope's eyes were bright with tears. "I would choose you 1,000 times over," she said. "In every life, in every dream, I would choose you." They kissed to the cheers of the crowd, and it was as sweet as their first kiss, as meaningful as their wedding kiss. Love did not fade, Nathan realized, not when it was built on the right foundation. It only grew deeper, richer, more essential. The years moved on as years do. They slowed down gradually, taking shorter trips, staying closer to home. Their bodies aged, joints stiffening in the cold, hair going gray and then white. But their love remained constant, a fixed point in a changing world. Nathan was 67 when he took ill, a fever that settled deep in his chest and would not break. Penelope nursed him with the same fierce determination she brought to everything, but they both knew what was coming. Their children gathered, bringing the grandchildren, and the cabin was full again, full of love and sorrow intertwined. On a clear autumn morning with leaves falling gold outside and Penelope's hand in his, Nathan opened his eyes and smiled. "I am not afraid," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know," Penelope said, tears streaming down her face. "You have never been afraid of anything." "That is not true. I was afraid of being alone, but you took that fear away." He squeezed her hand weakly. "I love you. From the moment I pulled you from that creek until this moment and beyond, I love you." "I love you too," Penelope said. "I will see you again. I will find you again, I promise." Nathan nodded, believing her, and closed his eyes. He died peacefully, surrounded by everyone he loved, and his last thought was of a frozen creek and green eyes and a voice saying, "I dreamed of you." Penelope lived another 10 years after Nathan's death. She stayed in the cabin, refusing to move despite her children's concerns, because Nathan was there. His presence was in every log, every corner, every memory. She tended the place they had built together, kept their story alive for the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who came to visit. On a winter morning much like the one when Nathan had found her, Penelope Owens Turner passed away in her sleep. She was 79 years old, and she died smiling, as if greeting an old friend. Her family buried her beside Nathan on the hill overlooking their cabin, with the mountains standing witness. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, they carved the words she had said to Nathan when he pulled her from the ice. "I dreamed of you." The cabin stood for many years after, maintained by their descendants, a monument to a love that defied logic and probability. The story was told and retold, embellished and remembered, a legend of the frontier. The cowboy who pulled a woman from a frozen creek, and the woman who had dreamed of him before they met, who had held on in the face of death because she believed he would come. It was a love story for the ages, simple and profound. Two people who found each other against impossible odds, who built a life of meaning and joy, who proved that sometimes the dreams we have are not fantasies but prophecies, glimpses of a future we are brave enough to claim. And in the end, that was the greatest truth of their story. Not that Nathan had saved Penelope, though he had. Not that Penelope had dreamed of Nathan, though she had. But that they had chosen each other, every day, in every circumstance, building something beautiful and lasting from a moment of crisis. They had turned a frozen creek in Montana territory into a foundation for forever, and their love became the stuff of legend, whispered about in Oro Blanco for generations to come. The cowboy and the woman who dreamed of him, who found each other and never let go, who proved that sometimes the right kind of love can change everything. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived in Montana, some on the ranch outside Oro Blanco, some in the cities that grew up around the old frontier towns. But they all knew the story, carried it with them like a talisman. They knew that somewhere in their blood ran the courage of a woman who ran toward freedom and the compassion of a man who pulled her from the ice. They knew that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth building a life around. The cabin eventually fell into disrepair despite the family's best efforts, as all things do with time. But the stone foundation remained, and the hill where Nathan and Penelope were buried stayed green in summer and snow-white in winter, a peaceful resting place for two souls who had found their home in each other. And on certain winter days, when the light hit the creek just right and ice formed along the banks, locals swore they could see two figures riding through the trees, a man and a woman on horseback, moving through the wilderness together as they always had, as they always would, bound by a love that transcended even death. For that was the true magic of their story. Not that Penelope had dreamed of Nathan, though that was remarkable. Not that Nathan had saved Penelope, though that was heroic. But that they had recognized in each other something essential, something true, and they had built a life around that recognition. They had turned a moment of crisis into a lifetime of love, and in doing so, they had created something that would echo through the generations. In the end, they had proved that the best stories are not the ones we tell, but the ones we live. And Nathan and Penelope had lived a story worth telling, a story worth remembering, a story that reminded everyone who heard it that love, real love, can save us in ways we never expect. The creek still flows in Montana, cold and clear, and ice still forms there in winter. And somewhere in the fabric of the universe, two souls who found each other against impossible odds continue their journey together, proving that some bonds are too strong for death to break, that some loves are eternal, written not just in stone but in the very stars themselves, a testament to the power of holding on, of dreaming true, of finding the one person in all the world who makes you whole.